Welcome back on the second day of the weekend. We are beginning with the second chapter. So far in chapter 1, we have heard of Pharaoh's plan to extinguish or at least reduce the number of Hebrews to prevent them from rising up later on in rebellion or joining others in rebellion by killing the male sons, the newborn sons. We see that, during this, as we look through it, and again, I encourage you to read through the whole chapter, we see how God hears and God knows our struggles, even though it might not seem like it. Genesis 2, let's start with the first verse. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him 3 months, so he wouldn't be killed by Pharaoh. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the riverbank. And his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, while her young women walked beside the river. She saw the basket among the reeds and sent her servant women, and she took it. And she opened it and saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." So the girl went and called the child's mother. God is protecting, isn't it? God is protecting Moses for a reason, for something great that will happen. This is even happening before we hear of God hearing his people call out to him. And God's already at work. He knows our problems before they come. And the problem was with the killing of the young sons. Moses' mother tried to hide him for 3 months and then made the basket, put him in the river, and God led the rest. So that Pharaoh's daughter would see him, would take him into the household and raise him with her as her own. It was a very protecting act of God, an act to save this child who would do great things. Let's move forward a couple verses to verse 11. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens and saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people. He looked this way and that, and seeing no one, he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the next day, behold, 2 Hebrews were struggling together. And he said to the man in the wrong, "Why do you strike your companion?" And he answered, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Then Moses was afraid and thought, surely the thing is known. What thing? The thing that he had killed that Egyptian. When Pharaoh heard of it, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian. Moses remembered who he was, that he was a Hebrew. And even though that he had grown up in the king's household, he knew from where he came. He knew his own people. When he saw an Egyptian slave master beating one of his people, he had to do something. And what he did was not right, taking a life. And because of that, he was driven out of Egypt by Pharaoh. And he went to Midian. Now, Midian, I apologize for not having a map for this one. I'll get you a map when they start going on their wanderings so I can show you Midian. It is really on the very northwest part of the Arabian Peninsula. And that's a part, so it's not that far from Egypt, across the Red Sea and a little gulf there. That's where he would be. And as he was living there, we're going to find out a little bit more about that in the days to come. He fled because of what he had done wrong. In a way, that's punishment. Remember that a result of our sins is punishment as well. Christ took our punishment, but yet we still need to deal with the temporal punishments, the punishment here on earth for doing the wrong. And that's what Moses did. So let's move forward. Verse 23. During those many days, the king of Egypt died, and the people of Israel groaned because of their slavery and cried out for help. Their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God, and God heard their groaning. And God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. God saw the people of Israel, and God knew. Another king, the king of Egypt, died, and the people of Israel groaned. The king who took over very likely was a different dynasty. So the punishment to Moses would not be the same as it would be for the old dynasty. And this dynasty seems to be treating the people of Israel even more harshly. It says they cried out, and God heard, and God knew. God knew their struggles and their difficulty. God knew beforehand what he was going to do. God knew 40 years earlier when he had Pharaoh's daughter walk alongside the sea, alongside the riverbank in order to find Moses. God knew what he needed to do to protect Moses by having him driven out of Egypt. God knew all along what was going to happen. He heard their cries, and he knew what he would do. Come back tomorrow, and we'll take a look at the call of Moses and the burning bush. We'll see you then.